Alright, so now that the modal is complete, we have a button, but it's not exactly doing anything. So now let's create a on click so that when we press on the add button, we'll make an API request to add our to do to the database. So we're going to send a request with the to do data that we got from the text input and send it to our API. So to do that, let's create a function right above here. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this function add to do, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to add a to do when we click the add button. So we'll just create this function, open this up, and then we're going to use fetch to reach out to our API. The URL for the API is still running on HTTP localhost 8080, and it's running on the endpoint v1/API/to do. And since we're trying to add something, this is going to be a post, so we got to specify that. Let's open up some curly braces. We're going to specify the method, right, to be post. The headers is going to let the API know that what we're going to send is going to be of content type application/JSON. So we're sending a JSON. And then what we're going to do is provide the body, and the body is simply going to be JSON.stringify, and within the stringify we're going to use new task, which is simply going to be the to do that this holds the title and the description that the user types in the text input in the modal. And we're going to stringify the object that is in the states and pass it as the body as we post to this URL, and it should take that in, it should add the to do. And then because this is going to be asynchronous, we're going to use a .then to handle that, and we expect to receive a response. And so we're going to have a variable called response right here, and with that response we want to return the response.json, because we want to get the response in a JSON format. And then we're going to do .then again to handle that JSON, which is just simply going to be the data that is returned from the API. And this data is simply going to be what I'm expecting to get back from the API, as the data is the to do that we just added, but with other information such as the ID that it's now associated with, the time that it was created, and the time that it was updated. So some more properties were added as it was added to the database. And if you followed my Spring Boot series, you will know that these things get added as we add it to the database. The ID is defined, created at is defined, which lets us know when it was created, and there's another timestamp that is created called updated at, which let us know when it was updated. So since we're creating it at this point, created at and updated at is going to be the same time. But if we ever update the to do, the times are going to change. So it's going to be a variable called data, and this is going to be our data that is being returned, or simply the response that's being returned back from the API, which in this case is going to be our to do. And then open that up, and now we got to start defining what we want to do now that we got the data back from the API. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another state called task, which is going to hold all, or to do's, which is going to hold all our to do's from the database. And whenever we add something to the database, we want to make sure that that's inserted into this state. So I'm going to create a new state. I'm going to call it to do's, and then the function is going to be called set to do's. So that's how I'm going to be able to add to my state using this function. And then I'm going to say that equal to a use state, use state, and then I'm going to make this hold an empty array for now, right? Because remember, with the to-dos, it can be more than one to-do, right? It'll be a array of objects. So like one to-do looks like this, but if we're trying to retrieve multiple, it's going to be an array, but it's going to be an array of multiple to-dos. All right. So whenever we add something, we want to make sure that we add it to this array. So we're getting the full experience with state management. We have one with objects, we have one with booleans, we have one with strings, and now we have one with array. So now let's go back. So now that we have this data from the database with what the to-do actually looks like now, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to add this to-do to our state, right? Because we expect to-dos to hold all our to-dos. So what we're going to do is set to-dos, and we're going to open that up. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up a bracket. We're going to take in the to-do that is coming back in the variable called data. And we're going to use the spread operator to make sure that it's going to be appending this data to all our other to-dos. So using the spread operator, we can do spread operator and then use the variable name to-dos. So it's going to take all the other to-dos that's currently inside of to-dos. It's going to append this data to it, and then it's going to set to-dos to this new array. Then what I want to do is I want to set opened to false, because that means we can close the modal after everything was added to the database, or after the API adds the to-do to the API or to the database. I want to close the modal because everything ran successfully. All right, cool. Now, when a user clicks on this button, we're going to use another on click, and we're going to set that equal to a function, right? And when a user clicks on this, actually we don't have to use this, since add to do is already a function. We don't have to define another function. All we got to do is when a user clicks on this, we just got to make sure that it runs add to do. So now when a user puts in the title, put in the description, and they click on a button, it's going to run this function of add to do. It's going to go up here. It's going to do a fetch, right? Or I'm using the fetch API to make a post using JSON of the to do that we created, or that we put into the text input. And then we're going to send that over to our API. That API is going to add it. It's going to send back the data associated to that to do that we just added. And then we're going to append that to do to our array that's going to be holding all our other to dos. And then we're going to close the modal, and we should be good to go. So let's actually test that out. If I go back to my website, and then I inspect, and actually let me put a console log just so I can see how data looks like. Console.log data, save that. Instead, I mean, if I go to console here, I should see it. Let me clear this out. So if I press the button, I put to do, the description will be first. Let me zoom in. I think this is, okay, there it is. First to do. And I press add. Ooh, something. Oh, okay, there it is. So it closes the modal. It goes back to the original screen. And what's being console logged right now is what we expect to see back from the API. This is going to be our response back. As you see, there's some attributes that are added. Like I said, the created at is added now because this is when it was added to our database. The description is at what we expect. The ID is what is going to be in the database. We have progress, which by default is false. So when we're done, we can press the done button, and it will set this to true in our database, which we're going to do. The titles to do as expected. Updated at is the other timestamp that I was talking about. When we do update, this is going to be different than created at, but currently they're both the same. So cool, right? So this is what we expect. And like I said, this is the data that's being returned as a response back from my API. We're going to take that to do. We're going to add that to the array, and then we're going to update the array with this new to do that was appended. And then we're going to close out the modal by setting the open variable to false. So cool. We have our first API request in the bag. But now let's actually retrieve all our to-dos, because now we're just adding, but we don't exactly see what's in our database, right? We don't know what to-dos are currently there. So we're gonna do another API request to fetch all of the to-dos in the database using our API. So to do that, I wanted to leverage the get static props function that we talked about, because what this is going to allow us to do is going to allow for us to use or to retrieve the information that we need for this page prior to rendering, right? So it's going to make the call during pre-render, and we talked about that in the first couple of videos, what pre-rendering is. So I'm going to leverage get static props. It's going to make the fetch for us, and then when the page loads, it's automatically going to have it, right? That functionality is already going to be there. So let's leverage that really quick. Let me go all the way to the bottom here. I'm going to do export async function, and I'm going to do get static props, right? Open up parentheses, open up the curly braces, and now I'm going to do the call for our a call to our API to get all of the to-dos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do const, and I'm going to call this res for response, and I'm going to make this equal to await, because we want to wait for the fetch to happen before we move on. So await for this fetch, and within this fetch it's going to be pointing to our API. So just do colon http localhost 8080, because this is where our API is. Now, depending on whatever port that you use, this could be different, but currently I'm running mine on 8080. It's going to be on v1/api/todo, and by default this is going to be get, so I don't have to define that, just like I did above. Before I had to define that this method was going to be a post, but by default fetch is get, so I don't have to define anything. So now I want to make sure that I'm taking the response from this fetch and I'm putting it in a variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this variable to do data, and I'm going to make that equal to I'm going to wait for the result to come in, and it's going to be equal to the result.json. Just like above here, when I made the fetch, it was stored in this variable called res, and I had to return the res.json, and then I used that data for other functionality. But in this case, I'm going to just take that JSON from the response, and I'm going to store it in a variable. Now, what this get static props allowed me to do is, with this response, I can pass this as a prop to my page, right? So when this page actually renders, this data is going to be already available to the page as a prop. So let's do that. So let's return, right, this as a prop. So we're going to use the props key. Open that up, and what's going to be returned is this to do data, right? So now we have a props with to do data, and now that's accessible in our page by opening up some curly braces here and extracting it by the name, which is to do data. Cool. So now I'm going to use another React function called useEffect, which is a function that runs right when the page loads. Okay, so everything within here is going to run when the page loads, and all I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to console log the to do data, because I want to see what happens when this page loads. Is this to do data going to be available? Like I said, get static props is supposed to run this during pre-render, so when this actually renders up, this to do data should already be populated with data that I expect after the fetch. So let's see. Let's save that. All right, okay, I didn't import useEffect. useEffect, save that, go back, and let me clear that out and reload, and boom, as you can see, I loaded the page, and you see that it's already showing the to-do data that's in our database. So it is working, right? And so now I don't even have to use this fetch anywhere else. I already know that this fetch is happening through a pre-render. We know we need this to do data when the page loads up, so this allows us to get this data during pre-render and have it available right away. Cool. So now that we have this data, Now we just have to display this data to the user once they get on this page. We know that it's here now because right now it's accessible through a prop. We're extracting it through a prop, and now it's called to do data. It's available here, but now we just have to show it to the user in a nice way. So let's start off by actually creating a to-do card, which will allow us to show the to-do in a nice way. We want to put it in a specific format. We want to provide some buttons to, let the user click on if they want to update it, if they want to mark it as complete, if they want to delete it. This card will show those buttons and show the to-do in a nice format. So I already created a components folder. Now in here, I'm just going to create a new file called to-do card. And this is the file that we're going to use to create a reusable component that will show the to-do in a nice way. So it's going to call that to-do card.js. And I'm going to use RFC to make a React functional component again. And this time it's going to be called to-do card because it's just taking the name of the file. And so now let's just get started and to make this nice for the user to see on our page.